Apart from United Airlines, what are the worst PR disasters of major corporations in history? Said this in another thread, but the one that stands out to me is the Pepsi campaign from the 90s in the Philippines. They offended a large cash prize to the person who got a certain number on their Pepsi, but they accidentally put it on 800,000 Pepsis. Pepsi employees were assaulted, there were violent riots and thousands of people sued. Pepsi also advertised you could win a Harrier military jet with 7 million Pepsi points. They got sued after a 21-year-old raised money through investors to redeem the jet, figuring the cost in Pepsi points was 10% the cost of the dollar value. Mountain Dew held a contest where anyone could submit a name for the new flavor anonymously on the internet, then vote for which name they wanted to succeed. The top 10 were posted on their website. Ike 9/10 of the top submissions were variations of Gush and Granny, with the number 1 being Hit Till I Did Nothing Wrong. One of them was Sprite, which I thought was way funnier than any of the others. The one that irritated me the most was when Bank of America had one of their customers arrested for inquiring about a questionable check. The guy had made a transaction with someone on Craigslist and was a little suspicious about the check he got, so he took it into his local branch to ask if it was legit. The teller held it for a bit, then said, "Yeah, go ahead and sign it." Once he signed it, they told him he was guilty of passing a bad check and arrested him. Samsung, their phones blow up, their washing machines blow up, and apparently their TVs listen to you in your home. A few years ago, Chevron had an accident on one of their Marcellus shale well sites in Pennsylvania that resulted in a young man being held and a giant gas well fire blowout that took days to extinguish. Chevron's response? Free pizza vouchers for the local community. Personal favorite was the Avenger game controller. It was a controller designed to be used by the disabled. When they had issues shipping on time, the head of their marketing team contractor took to personally harassing people complaining about the delays. Happened in 2011. Fun read if you are interested. Edit. Got the guy wrong in my original post. Was the marketing guy who was harassing people, not the CEO. When the CEO of BP, Tony Hayward, said, "There's no one who wants this over more than I do. I would like my life back during the oil spill." When Nestle gave out formula in poor countries, even though many there didn't have access to clean water and would really water down the formula to make it last. They tried to present formula as superior to breast milk but ended up killing a fair amount of babies. Rarely does a marketing concept end up with lots of dead babies, but Nestle managed to do that. That was not simple marketing, that was pure evil. They specifically designed the amount they gave away for free so that the natural milk flow of the mother would have stopped by the time they'd ran out of it, and therefore forcing poor families to buy their products as the mother couldn't feed their baby otherwise, and distributed the samples by salespeople dressed as nurses, doctors in the maternity wards, healthcare stations. I am a Swiss citizen and this company is one of the biggest embarrassments to this country. I'm surprised I haven't seen anybody mention the unlimited crab legs that nearly sunk Red Lobster back in the early 2000s. I remember this one. My mom loved crab legs, so she invited her mom, and away we went. After our 5th platter, around £2 per platter, the manager came and told us that they would not be serving us any more food. To be fair, there were 5 of us, and £10 of crab really isn't that much when we were all paying over $20 a person. Did y'all know why I stayed? For those who don't know, basically, a hashtag called why I stayed was going around Twitter as a way for people to explain why they stayed with abusive partners. Did y'all know misinterpreted it and tweeted, "Why I stayed, he had pizza," and then came the backlash. I remember watching the Holocaust TV miniseries back in the late 70s. Baltimore DC market if that matters. The commercial directly following the scene where the cremations took place and their after effects was for Snoopy Sniffer and Easy Off Oven Cleaner product. My family's jaws dropped and nothing was said for what seemed to be an eternity. It was one very long and silent cringe. We talked about the next morning over breakfast. Odd stuff. I think it made the papers. Adult Swim, a block of programming on Cartoon Network, hired two guys in Boston as part of a sort of guerrilla marketing thing for their movie based on their Aqua Teen Hunger Force show. These two guys would put up these light up LED boards in various places in the city, and they had the characters on it. At the least, it had the Moonlights flipping the bird. They put them in places like near a bridge and whatnot. This was in 2007, so people were still on edge, and people eventually would see these hastily assembled boxes with wires and LEDs near places like bridges. You can imagine how that went. Things didn't go well. Though authorities would later be ridiculed for overreacting, there was still a backlash against Adult Swim and Cartoon Network. The resulting backlash caused an executive vice president to resign. This resignation caused a shuffling of executives at Cartoon Network, and the man who replaced him was one Stuart Snyder. Under Snyder, Cartoon Network increased its amount of live-action shows. It should be noted that the man he replaced, Samples, did introduce some live-action stuff, but it increased greatly under Snyder. The beloved Toonami block was axed. General quality started going down as they pushed more live-action stuff, such as Dude, What Would Happen, which was essentially a dumb, kid version of Mythbusters. Again, this is Cartoon Network. Eventually the ship righted itself, better quality shows began to come in, Adventure Time, regular show, and Toonami was revived on the Adult Swim block, so things worked out in the end. But it still went through a rather chaotic period. All because of some idiot who decided that having two artists put wired light-up boxes in areas in Boston was a good idea. Alternatively, the two artists were idiots. Or both. Not a major corporation, but O.J. Simpson Publishing if I did it after the murder of his wife. The Ford Pinto. It could have been a great smaller car that didn't cost an arm and a leg. I had one for years and it was actually fun to work on. It could have been like the VW Beetle. But the design called for a rubber or plastic liner for the fuel tank as a safety feature in case the car was rear-ended. The bean counters nixed that because they figured out that in the long run they would probably save money by eliminating it. They calculated that they would have to pay out in some wrongful death lawsuits, but in the long run it would be a winner to the bottom line. It would have added about $25 to the price of the car. Edit. Great responses. You guys are my brother Pinto geeks. I bow before you superior knowledge. The real shame about the Pinto was that it could have been a very important car to the American auto industry. After Asiana Airlines Flight 214 crashed in San Francisco, KTVU released the names of the crew. Captain Something Wong, Weeta Lo, Holy Fuck, and Bang Ding Ao. I'm guessing someone got fired after that incident. The first time I saw that video is in the top 10 times I've laughed the hardest in my life. It didn't click until they said the last name and I ducking lost it. Don Matrick promoting the Xbox One. When the system was first introduced, Microsoft intended it to implement a number of draconian new policies, having to check in on Xbox Live every 24 hours, no more used games. Games would be locked to your account and console. In order to borrow a game from a friend, they would have to authorize you to play. I think you only had 48 hours to try it out. It would have been mandatory to have the Kinect plugged in at all times. All this, coupled with Matrix saying there was already a product for people without online connectivity, Xbox 360, resulted in Microsoft scrapping these plans. Here's the video of Matrix telling users to stick with the 360. Not to mention the name. The idea was that since everybody had abbreviated the Xbox 360 to just the 360, they'd name the next console the Xbox One and people would call it the One, which would be a super cool name. It's the One. Everyone was totally on board with it. Then came the reveal, and minutes later social media was alive with LOL Xbone and the marketing team uttered a collective oh shit. In 1984, McDonald's did a promotion where for every event the USA won in the Olympics, customers could get free food. They knew that the Soviet Union would win a lot, so they wouldn't have to give away too much. This was the year that Russia chose to boycott the Olympics. America dominated, winning 174 gold medals, and McDonald's lost a deal of money. I would say that Bud Light campaign to remove no from your vocabulary. which I guess to them sounded good in their heads, but ended up just sounding really rappy. Malaysia Airlines has to be up there. It launched the My Ultimate Bucket List campaign, asking its customers what they want to do before they die, not long after the MH370 and MH17 tragedies. Edit, added MH17. What will you do with your life before you get on one of our planes? Seriously, they might as well schedule a flight through the Bermuda Triangle on Friday the 13th on a full moon if possible, just for the damn thrill of it. Target's credit card data hacks. Also, moving to Canada was probably worse. They acted like Canada had never had a department store before and promised the lowest prices. They showed up, the deals were shit, they lost billions and left. It's probably forgotten now, but the McAfrica burger from McDonald's. An entire continent of starving people, well, not quite, with a lot of countries suffering from famine at the time, and they just named this new burger after the entire place. They also refused to pull the burger and let it do the entire campaign in 2002. And they brought it back in 2008. Edit, entire continent of starving people is wrong. However, there was a lot of famine at the time. Still, I'll take my lumps for that one. A Vietnamese customer found a fly inside his energy drink, number 1. From soft drink company in Vietnam, Tan Heap Fat. He tried to ask for compensation from a company, approximately $50 K, or he will go public about it. After a few talk, they both reached an agreement that would lower the compensation to $25 K, and the company agreed to pay. However, they contacted the police and sued him for blackmailing them. After trial, the customer got 7 years in prison. The company won the lawsuit, however they got shit on by the community for doing that, lost approximately $50 million. Well, there is one interesting case going on with Mazda Vietnam. If you guys want to hear, just let me know. Lol, sorry for bad English. Not my native language though. New Coke. I still maintain that was a brilliant, and completely intentional, bit of marketing. It wasn't. Pepsi had been gaining a lot of market share with the Pepsi challenge, and Coca-Cola freaked out about it. So they underwent a top secret project, spending years and millions of dollars developing a new formula for Coke. After hundreds of thousands of taste tests, they finally had a formula that was consistently picked as better than Pepsi, which they released as New Coke. In doing so, they basically took close to 100 years of brand meaning and completely trashed it. Pepsi was so happy when it happened that they issued a congratulatory memo to everyone in the company and gave them all a day off. The disaster of New Coke and Coca-Cola's recovery from it are really fascinating, and it's a standard case for study in business schools everywhere. I always find it kind of a shame when people tout the conspiracy theory of they planned it all along, because I find it much less interesting than what actually happened. Pepsi and the code lottery. They created riots in the Philippines after hundreds of codes won and Pepsi refused to pay. To this day, the Philippines is Coke territory. Blizzard decided that the best way to combat the toxic nature of their online community in World of Warcraft was to introduce the Real ID system, which effectively doxes the entire WoW community to each other by having their account associated with their real name. The backlash was so severe, and Blizzard probably realized they can't even legally dox parts of their own community because of their rage, so they ended up pulling it. Flatly, Battle.net 2.0. That time EA paid PR people to host faux protests for Dante's Inferno, which turned out to be a fairly unremarkable game. That other time EA paid grandmas and old people to play Dead Space and recoil at it on camera so that people who, in principle, should not have been able to buy an M-rated game because they are too young would know their parents don't like the game. Ubisoft's general treatment of PC gamers as thieves and criminals, and retaliating by selling them defective products that don't work. Phil Fish. The Tylenol deaths that happened in the 80s. In 1982, 7 people died after taking Tylenol. Johnson & Johnson immediately halted all production and issued a nationwide recall costing them upwards of $100 million. It was eventually determined that someone had tampered with the bottles and laced pills with cyanide, which led to Johnson & Johnson developing tamper-proof packaging. Even though it wasn't the company's fault, this sort of thing tends to destroy brands. Amazingly, primarily due to the company's strong and decisive actions, they were able to rebuild trust in the brand and overcome what happened. Richmond International Raceway hosted a race that was sponsored by Federated Auto Parts, called the Federated Auto Parts 400. The hashtag to promote it, FAP400. I distinctly remember a period not too long ago where a beer company, that was known for high quality beer, tried to cut costs by using subpar ingredients. Initially, no one really noticed, so they took it a step farther. Then they did it again. Eventually, their consumers caught on and were royally upset. The company tried to back off and return to form, but they never recovered. I think they went out of business, or some such. I wish I could remember the company. Maybe I can find it. This might have been a case study from college now that I think about it. Schlitz was the largest or second largest brewer in the US. Before screwing up. When the product went downhill, the name did not help at all. Malaysia Airlines. It wasn't just because the plane was lost and couldn't be found, although many people were upset about that. Their PR response was terrible, marginalizing or ignoring the families involved while generally refusing to talk to the press or take any real responsibility. There was a really big and successful Chevy dealership near me that got caught changing people's paperwork after the sale and using carbon paper to forge signatures. People would get a great interest rate, leave, and the dealership was changing the rate to exorbitant rates, like going from 0.9% to 12.5%. They got caught. A lot of people went to jail, including the owner, and the dealership was shut down overnight. After last Friday's terrorist attack in central Stockholm, the store in which the truck crashed into, Allen's, decided to send out an email, Saturday evening, to their members saying that they would open the store on Sunday and that all damaged merchandise would be 50% off. The CEO later apologized and they kept the store closed. Way to try to make money out of a tragedy. This year is Canada's 150th birthday. Via Rail, the only wheel rail company up here, put out a promotion for youth aged 18-28 to buy tickets across Canada for $150 CAD. That's a ducking fantastic deal. The problem is that they claim to be selling an unlimited number of these. Clearly, they grossly underestimated how many people would take the opportunity to see our country without going broke. 2 million youth attempted to buy tickets, and within 48 hours Via backdailed on it and stated that only 1,867, year of Confederation, were sold, and that sales were now closed. People are rightfully hissed about being led on like that, and they've now lost business from an entire generation. GG, fucktards. Not the worst, but certainly ranks up there. Ford Australia makes, or made, as they are tragically shutting up shop, a sedan and ute version of the Ford Falcon. The cars are almost the same from the front doors forward, but have minor detail changes that are sometimes required because the back of the ute is updated less frequently than the front of the sedan. At a product launch press release for the new range many years ago, one of the motoring journalists was comparing the promotional handouts for the sedan with the promotional handouts for the ute. They had the same format and said the same things in the same place, with obvious exceptions like big carrying capacity for the ute and lots of rear legroom for the sedan. Strangely, the sedan handout listed side intrusion bars under safety features, whereas the ute handout did not. The journalist asked an engineer why this was so. Surely both models would have side intrusion bars since they essentially use the same doors? The engineer openly admitted that side intrusion bars had been omitted from the ute design as they needed to save $6. Once again, the guy he was telling this to was a motoring journalist. Oops. This will be buried, but Smith & Amp, Wesson had a pretty bad run during the Clinton administration. Basically, for several decades, S&Amp W was the gold standard for police service revolvers. Then Glock came onto the market and started eating their lunch, because a reliable polymer 9mm with 17 rounds on tap allows more flexibility than a 6-shooter. At that gum sales were not going so well, and that the 1994 assault weapons ban was curbing a decent amount of civilian gum sales, and most gum companies needed government contracts to stay solvent. Enter the Clinton administration. In exchange for a way out of their fiscal issues, and some easier access to government contracts, they were asked to compromise on a few things, including putting a safety lock on their revolvers that could be activated with a key. Turns out, there were a few problems with this. One was that, in addition to being aesthetically poor, sometimes they would turn themselves on, locking the gum up, sometimes to the point of being inoperable. Non-gum people, imagine if your car's airbag had a small chance of randomly deploying. The bigger issue is that there was a massive boycott of the company, led in part by the NRA. Most gum people didn't like the AWB or being told what they could buy, and S&W was seen as being in bed with the people the gum owners disliked the most. The result was that Tompkins plc, who owned S&W, sold the company for $15 million, after having paid $112 million to acquire the company a few years back. The purchasing company, Safety Hammer, who made the locks in the first place, also acquired $30 million to $45 million in debt when they bought S&W. So yeah, that was a pretty big PR disaster. Them and cheaper than dirt after Sandy Hook. Back in August of 2016, operations ceased for the Scully motorcycle helmet, which was basically supposed to be the first smart helmet with things such as an augmented reality display in the visor, rear view camera, built-in Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, etc. Think Google Glass meets motorcycle helmet. The two brothers who began the startup made about $2.5 million from crowdfunding and then another $11 million from investors. Then it all went downhill as they squandered the money on luxury vehicles, vacations, homes, you name it. Ultimately, once they found out that they wouldn't actually be able to deliver on the technology that they promised, they filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and the nearly 1,000 people who prepaid for the helmet would be getting neither their helmet nor a refund. Pepsi had a campaign in the 90s called Pepsi Points, in which each Pepsi product gave you a certain number of points. In the commercial they showed crap like sunglasses and jackets for a certain number of points, but at the end they said you could get a Harrier fighter jet for 7 million points. Some guy did the math and figured out that you could get a $33 million jet for around $700,000. After finding a few investors, he sent Pepsi a letter requesting a Harrier jet. They refused. Long story short, he took Pepsi to court and lost. Not really a fail, but it still cost Pepsi money.